Phil Harris and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible fortnightly podcast, Dream Big, Move Fast.
A progressive, contemporary conversation on what it takes to be a dynamic thinker, leader, and role model.
Backed with over 2 decades of friendship, trials and tribulations that teach from real-world experience and what it takes to dream big, move fast. Successful people are successful because they are what they do and they do what they are. Jill Nordstrom. Phil, what are your thoughts about this, about that, that whole congruence, I guess, of like being one with what you do as opposed to rapid separation in your identity and your profile?
Yeah, I think it's really important that, all of the successful people that I know, it's certainly not a switch on, switch off lifestyle, meaning that, I'm going to have my work mode where I'm all in this, and then all of a sudden I just turn that off and I completely separate myself, and now I go into leisure mode, then I turn that off, then I'm going into family mode. I think the most successful people that I know, there seems to be this blend where success in both life and business, family, health, well-being, it's all rolled into one lifestyle as opposed to being far too individualized.
I was thinking, it's a really interesting conversation to kind of get that right, that, great people, they're always on and they actually have to turn it off. And then you meet other people who've got, I've got to turn it on because I'm in work mode now. It's like, well, no, learn how to oscillate between being at the highest level of performance and then back into your recovery modes. And this is that whole thing, is that be congruent. You can't hate being a real estate agent and then all of a sudden turn it on that you love it when you go to auctions. You can't, and you see that sometimes too, when someone smiles at you, and then literally if you had a freeze frame and there was a video camera of the meter once they've walked past you and then they go back to frowning again, you're like, that's just fake. You got to be in a position that you're actually really real around what it is that you do and learn how to be just one person.
And I don't think if that's the type of person that you are, you feel like you've got to really try hard, then I'm not really sure that's a long-term sustainable approach to greatness anyway, if you truly want to be great at what you do. So I think it needs to be a lifestyle. I don't think you shouldn't have to wake up every morning and say, look, you know what, today, Josh, I'm going to try to go out there and be a really great agent today, or today I'm going to try to be a great husband, or today I'm going to try and have, great health and well-being. As I said, it all kind of rolls into one as being an entire lifestyle that you are living.
And I think that this is the interesting thing. It burns energy trying to do that. You're much better just to be congruent with it and go, hey, look, I want to become the best in the world around doing that particular thing and just nail that and go all in and, drop the insecurities and drop the doubt and drop the fear and absolutely just make the decision, hey, this is me. Because every single time that you're working on a backup plan, you're absolutely not working the main plan. And that's a really important part. It leads us to a great conversation today around routines for a successful life. There's a great story in your background around tennis and what you were going to do there, and Leighton Hewitt and you, either one was going to make it onto the circuit, and you had that conversation that you were his hit-up partner, and so you must have learned a lot of routines that came from the sporting disciplines, and then you have amplified that into a very successful business life. Tell us a little bit about this whole conversations around what is a routine, how does it work, and why is it important to build out for a successful life?
Yeah, I think as far as the routine conversation goes, Josh, I think this is something that I probably started to really embrace going back, it's probably somewhere around 15 years ago, where I remember going along, I started reading more books, started going along to more kind of high performance conferences and hearing from people that had achieved great success in their life. And then what I started to realize is that there is a handful of basic routines, and sure, we can roll this out talking about more specific, real estate routines today, and I'm sure we'll get to that. There's probably about half a dozen routines that I found of some of the most highly successful people on the planet that they run on a daily, weekly basis. And that I started to learn the power of stacking, where, it's kind of quite counter in today's day and age. People want success and they want it overnight. But I learned 15 years ago that gradually, if you implement a series of routines into your life, the basics of, getting good sleep and having good nutrition and having a routine that you go through every morning when you first wake up to get yourself into a state of peak performance, and then having routines that you might do before you go to bed so that you do get a good night's sleep, having routines about education, which might sound monotonous to a lot of people. We'll unpack that today and they'll learn that it's not. But you gradually start to realize that if you implement a series of routines into your life and you stack a series of wins along the way, gradually over a period of time, and here I am looking back 15 years' time, it's those small daily wins layered upon layer upon layer over a sustained period of time that ends up, being what, external people may see as large success.
And this is interesting about what is it, the great wonder of the world, the eighth wonder, about like compound interest, right? Like literally just done over and over and over and over and over. Eventually you absolutely become the best in the world at doing that thing. And so talk to us a little bit about like what you see as being some of the most and important successful routines that you have learnt that have absolutely changed the course of your trajectory in what you've done as a person.
I think, and I know this has been quite pivotal for both of us, Josh, is that like first and foremost is getting some really great routines around health and well-being. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a lifestyle that perhaps that you and I have maybe naturally just gravitated towards right from day one. But I would say that I'm far more strict in my health routines now than what I was 15 years ago. I'm a lot more focused around making sure that I've got those routines in place. Like I was naturally, there's always been an attraction because of my sporting background to health and well-being. But I'd say I'm far more focused around the routines I'd have compared to, 20 years ago when I was trying to play sport or whatever it might be. So first and foremost, I think it starts with health and well-being. So the routines that I would say is like, if you haven't got great routines in your life based around diet, sleep and exercise, for me, that's going to be the bedrock or the foundation of everything else that you want to do. So, basic routines and systems. Like, today I'm sitting here wearing a Whoop band. I've been on those for a couple of years now where I am quite conscious of making sure that I am getting 7 or 8 hours sleep per year, and I've got a strong, per night, I should say, and I've got a strong recovery. I know from my perspective, if I have a great sleep routine, so then it comes down to, okay, if I want to get 7 or 8 hours sleep per night, Josh, what does my routine look like leading up to bedtime at night? Well, I want to make sure that I'm not sitting on social media, flicking through, looking at that at night. I'm not watching TV. I'm very mindful of what I eat, what I drink, kind of in that last hour or two before I go to bed. So I'd say that I've got a sleep routine. Then I've got a physical exercise of how many days per week I work out and what time I do it and what I'm doing. So that's another routine. Then I've got some basic health routines around diet, around what I'm actually putting in my mouth and what I'm not. So I'd say, look, health is the first thing, because if you haven't got your health, then it doesn't matter how good you are at prospecting, listing and selling. You and I both know a number of real estate agents. You can be great at prospecting, listing and selling, but if you haven't got your health, you can't get after it, right? So that'd be the first one. Get some great routines around health and well-being. And then the other major ones that really kind of come to mind for me, Josh, that I would say that have been really, really pivotal is number one is a morning routine. So I have a morning ritual that I'll go through every morning, which is what time I get out of bed, what amount of fluid intake I'll take straight away when I wake up, vitamins, exercise, quiet time, goal setting, organisation. So that's been a real fundamental one of mine of starting my day right every single day. And then just kind of rattle off a couple of others. I haven't got time to go through and unpack all of those. But, I have an evening routine. I have an education routine of making sure that I'm learning every single day. Now, some of these also cross over, I would say, going from routines to being systems, of some of those things. The other key one as well that I don't see, and this has been a real foundational one for me, Josh, that's made a major impact, is having a weekly review. So I take an hour out every single week, and the agenda for that is pretty straightforward. I look at every appointment that I've done in the last 7 days, looking back on my diary. I look forward to my diary for the next 7 days and look at what big appointments have I got coming up? What can I do to be more influential? So what are some things I can do today or the next couple of days before a big meeting coming up on that Friday? So I review last week. I review next week. I review my goals. I tidy up some storage buckets that I've got that might be hard copy or digital where I've filed some articles away that I wanted to review. I'll review my personal goals, my personal health plan and my business plan. That takes about an hour, but I'm totally focused coming to the next 7 days of being completely organised and ready to go. So there's a number of others, but they're kind of the key ones that get me thinking straight away.
So you might not remember, but before I got into residential real estate, I actually used to work in newspapers. And one of the things about a newspaper is that back in the day, that had to be on your front lawn by 5 a.m. And in order for that to happen, that needed to be on the printing press by 2 a.m. In order for that to happen, that needed to be at the press plates by 11 p.m. In order for that to occur, final editors had to be there at 10 p.m. And then literally final headline for the front page needed to be at 6 p.m. And then literally we then work it all the way back until we're actually doing how many pages is the newspaper going to be? Is it 32 or 64? And that needs to be decided about 9 a.m. based on the volume of advertisers that we've got that are going to be putting their ads in tomorrow's paper. And, we learned very clearly that literally if you work to a deadline, you have a phenomenal routine. And there's not a day that we missed in getting the newspaper out. Now, I inadvertently picked that up. And I said, okay, great. So one of my routines is that I worked out that I want the first hour of every business day to be in marketing, creating opportunity. And so my version of that is that, like, how do I make sure that the first hour of every day that something's landing in the email inbox? And so we started with the daily email, and then later on that became podcasts and videos and a whole range of these layers over time. And now like people are like, wow, you're a prolific content producer. And that actually came because we actually set up those routines to go and do it. So routine to me is a set of systems that are worked on a regular and consistent basis that produce an outcome with minimal variance to guarantee result. And it's like, okay, great. So I start thinking about that like the most powerful routines are the ones that get you the results over time. And what you've got to do is that, like, will this or won't this lead to the type of person that you want to become? Now, we went and did, Sue McCarthy, I know Tom Hector and your team came with me to that over at the Kangaroo Island Health Retreat many years ago. And it's been a very powerful foundational piece. I think I nearly went there 11 or 12 times. And what Sue would say to you is that she would cup her hand and she would look at you and she would say, okay, great, Phil, how old are you going to be when you die? And it's a really confronting conversation because you're like, well, I don't know, Sue. And she's like, we'll figure it out overnight. And the next morning she comes and she says, well, how old? And that's the first thing she says to you. And I would say to her, I'm going to be 100 plus, Sue. And she goes, okay, great. And are you living in a way that is conducive to you being at 100 plus? Oh, well, probably not. Okay, great. Well, let's talk about some areas that we've got to clean up, that we've got to improve to be able to get you to that level of performance. And so, okay, great. So what I learned is that ultimately I'm massively a routine guy because when I find something that works, I go all in. I'm probably one of the easiest guys to kill too because you're going to know where I'm having breakfast, you're going to know where I'm having dinner, you're going to know where I'm going to stay, you're going to know everything. Like I'm not hard to work out. And some people say, oh, that's ridiculously boring, but I find it incredibly freeing because I know it actually works. So, Phil, establishing that is about what are the important goals for you and how are you working towards getting to those? So if you want to go out there and you've got a routine on a consistent basis, you can do it, but you've got to have a plan, and that's the only reason why a goal actually occurs. So if I think about powerful routines, okay, great. What would be a really powerful routine in a sales business is that if you actually use the first 45 minutes of your business day to go and create opportunity. It's like, hey man, what are you doing later? You want to come create some opportunity? I feel so much better about that than I've got to drag myself in to go and prospect. And this is that mindset hack of I get to do this rather than I have to do this. I get to prospect today. I get to go to that listing presentation. I get to resell that house because it fell over last night. And that's the really important conversation is about, okay, what are the routines and then how do I teach it? So I found that calendar is life. So if it goes in the calendar, it happens. But then learning the system, okay, right? So here's a basic system. The flight's at 5 p.m. I need to be at the airport by 4 p.m. So between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock, I'm traveling to the airport. How do I make that time really useful? Okay, great. That's going to be my call time because I'm in the car and there's nothing else I can do except be on the phone whilst I'm driving with hands-free to the airport. I can't update my email then. I can't do my social media posting then because it's not the right time and context. Can you talk to us about the power of actually understanding time and context of what can I do here and what can I do there so then I'm really focused? Because I know that with Alexander Phillips, he won't take my call between 8 o'clock and 3 o'clock unless it's a deal. But before 8 o'clock's coaching and after 3 o'clock can be coaching, but he's really clear about when's prime time, baby, when he's actually working with customers.
Yeah, and we've spoken about this previously, Josh, just in terms of what are the universal patterns of a successful career in real estate and what does that look like? I know we've spoken about the simplicity in the past, Josh, of just the simple saying of AM, PM, of going a very, very simple routine. If you think about the flows of being a successful agent, the reality is AM is always a better time to be doing those outbound prospecting calls, and PM is a much better kind of energy state for bringing deals together. So in terms of times, if I'm thinking about real estate agents, the routines that need to be covered off first thing in the morning, we speak about this regularly, is making sure that first routine would be that morning meetings, and that's either going to be with yourself or with your team, but there's a quick little 15-minute huddle that needs to take place so that routine unfolds and it sets yourself up for the day. So once you've had that 15 meeting, well, your team manager and your co-agent, they can get on and go and do what they need to do. And now you can get on and do what you need to do, which is go into that first prospecting session, which is what you spoke about. I like what you also said there, which is Alexander Phillips has got some really clear rules, which is that, you say the first 45 minutes, I'd say for Alex, it's probably long. It's probably the first 2 or 3 hours of his day, which is based around, creating opportunity. But some really clear rules there, which is, if I'm halfway through doing a deal, I'll take a call on that. Or maybe it's an urgent call back. I'm waiting on somebody who's bringing me back to say I've got the yay or nay on a listing. I'll take that call. But anything outside of that is going to be responded to maybe between the hours of 12 and 1 p.m. when having a quick bite to eat before I go out for my afternoon appointments, wherever it might be. But I'm going to maintain that discipline of having that routine, which is a prospecting routine, up until about midday on a daily basis. And then you start to think about what are some other routines for agents on a daily basis as well, and just getting in that flow of saying, hey, what are some basic metrics in my business of outbound prospecting calls per day? And then the afternoons, how many face-to-face appointments am I generating with people who can say yes to either buying or selling?
So I look at these routines have got to be around those three areas of life, like, health and family and then work. And you've got to put them in the calendar that way, because you can't be great for your family if you're in the ICU. Off the back of that, literally, there's no point having a great work life and having a terrible personal life. And you've got to be in a position you get clarity on that. And so a planned life is a great life. But I saw Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, come out recently, and he says that about 60% of his calendar is free. So he only plans the 40%. So he's actually still got some time. Now, Phil, I'm planned within an inch of my life. And so, what I did recently is I've actually now scheduled unscheduled time. And so like between 5 a.m. and 11 a.m. on a Saturday morning, I'm just loose with my time. and it's actually so freeing, because it allows me to chase opportunities that come up at the last minute, or that I might not have had time to go to pursue because I've actually got some time around. So tell us a bit about that, about, what's the importance about having some time for free thinking and, free balling around where opportunities might be, as opposed to always being like super structured. Like, is there a room for that in your schedule?
Yeah, definitely. If I think of how my week is structured now on a daily basis, I'm a lot more structured towards the mornings in terms of the work of of deep work. So for the way I structure myself, if I've got deep work that I want to do, generally that's going to occur before midday for a couple of reasons. One is my diary is a lot more controllable in the mornings. And it seems to be that kind of disaster or recovery management always seems to occur at an afternoon. So I like to leave my afternoons more flexible to have urgent meetings with people, to fight fires and do those sorts of things. So from a daily basis, a lot more structured. And from a salesperson, I would relate that to be far more structured in the morning around that prospecting, than leave your afternoons for flexibility time. But on my own work week, Josh, I'm a lot more flexible on Fridays, of trying to have very little, if any, appointments on Fridays. And that's my creative thinking space, Josh. That's where I do get a journal out, and I've also, in terms of systems, I've filed away articles during the week that I wanted to read. So a great article comes across my desk. I feel like I've got to be across that. It might be about some technology or innovation that's happening in the real estate space, and I feel like it's my responsibility to be across that for the organisation. I'm going to park that, and I'm going to leave that till Friday, where I'm going to do some real creative time and not have many appointments or anything like that. I can sit down, I can read, and I can think, or I can have a cup of coffee with somebody in relation to an issue that I'm contemplating or thinking about. So I think structuring creative space is a really important part of this as well.
Yeah, one of the great routines is also about changing the level at which you're thinking about your life, rather than just the day-to-day issues. And, I heard about that concept about Bill Gates having Think Week, where he would literally get all the books that he's been meaning to read for the year, and he would go off and he would, get a nice little place to go and stay up for the week. And he would literally do not too much else, but apart from read and look after his body and really think about, what he wanted to go to create. And I've tried to instill that into my life over the course of the last decade, where I'll actually take a week off and I've actually got that plan in the calendar, and I'll go and read and just absorb and think about that. And, sometimes the best ideas are absolutely when you're not at the wheel. And it's a big, conversation to get that right, and starting to think about that if you want a great life, you got to change the inputs, because the inputs actually then need to be able to survive inside of that environment. And then you then need to start to think about the behaviors, because you got to behave your way to success. Now, there are a group of people that wake up in the morning right now around the world with the goal to eat as much as they can so that they can become competitive in their sport. And that sport is sumo wrestling. And the bigger you are, the more successful you're probably going to be in the sport. Now, I don't know if you're going for that goal. I'm not, but that basic idea is to start thinking, okay, great. Well, they've actually got a routine and they know what they've got to go and do. And so it's like, okay, stop fighting it, stop the procrastination, stop the worry about insecurities and doubts and fears, and go all in on what's going to make you successful. And, you would expect that a great cafe, a great restaurant is going to be prepared before you turn up, and that they've got people that are going to do very specific routines to get that Macca's store opened. Well, it's no different in your world. To get this thing on the track, okay, great. Every Saturday morning, all of my groceries turn up at my house and they're there on the front door and it's delivered. And it's amazing because I bring that in and I put that into my fridge, and within like literally 15 minutes of 7 a.m., I've got literally at operating standard, hotel grade, quality food ready to go, sitting in my house, and I don't have to worry about that. Every Sunday, I go and fill my car with petrol, and I don't have to worry about petrol all week because I've actually already got that done. One of the great routines is that literally I've got my phone set that at 8 p.m. at night, it starts to go into sleep mode, so that in the hour before I go to bed at 9 o'clock, I'm not on electronic devices. I'm actually in a position that I'm doing some other things before I get into that point. I make sure that all of my clothes and ironing and washing and all that sort of stuff is done so that by 8 a.m. on Saturday morning, we're at hotel grade. My suits are dropped at the dry cleaners on Saturday morning. They're picked up on Saturday morning for last week's roll. So I'm not fighting with the iron at 7 a.m. every Tuesday and every Thursday morning to try to get a shirt ready. And when you start to run a set of systems like that, the randomness of painfulness of running late and your life not being in order is gone. And you can actually get yourself into optimum levels of performance. And, my dad said this to me very early on in life. It's what you do when things are quiet that makes all the difference when things get busy. So I operate at speed during my week, and then I'm going to operate very slowly outside of that, doing the things that really count and taking care of things, so then I can be at my best when my best is needed.
So take home for the guys, Josh, you're a salesperson listening. What are the top half a dozen routines that you think should be mastered for somebody who's serious about scaling their business?
Get your holidays planned 12 months in advance. And I couldn't say that
anymore. Start with your time off.
Start with your time off. And it's complete opposite of what people think. But I learned very early, holiday when there's public holidays, and holiday when there's down periods around revenue and activity.
So be sensible in your holiday plan, right?
Yeah. So like I look at it, okay, great. The 2 weeks over Easter, arguably a week or two somewhere in June and July, maybe a week, for example, the first week of November, Melbourne Cup week, good week. December 10 till January 5, that's when I go early rather than go late. And interesting conversation, that's worked for me, and it's a pre-planned life. Secondary part, get really, really clear about when you're going to have some extra time off or some longer weekends or an extra day or something appropriate so that you can be successful in your duties in life, whether or not you're a great mum, dad, brother, sister, auntie, uncle, whatever. That's a really
I really like that because it's just sensible. Like, you got public holidays. Take a day off on either side of the public holiday. You take a one-day public holiday can turn into a 6-day break,
Yeah.
And really they're kind of cheat days because you're not missing any work.
Yeah, and then be in a position to go, well, when I work, I work. So, okay, great. So I'm going to go to bed early. I'm going to wake up early. I'm going to look about how I move, better known as my physical functioning form.
So number one, plan holidays. Yeah.
Two. To number two, make sure that you've got a great routine of when you get up and on what you're going to do in that first hour. And to me, that's a conversation around exercise. And if you don't like that, then it's the conversation about how your body moves. And if you don't like the word diet, well, then call it nutrition. But how you're going to feed yourself. So I'm going to make sure that my breakfast is going to be of champions. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to have a great lunch every day at midday. And then I'm going to make sure I'm going to have an early dinner.
We've got good holidays. We've got good sleep. We've got health and well-being is in check. You've got some routines around that about what you do.
But I know it sounds crazy, but I eat at midday because I want to make sure that I'm eating at 6 p.m. So then I make sure that I'm eating again at like 6:30, 7 a.m. in the morning. And if I do that over a period of time, it's incredibly successful. What's my start time in the office? So if that's 8:15 without kids. So
now we're checking in. So, okay.
Yeah. It's 8:15 without kids or 9 o'clock because I've dropped kids at school, no problems.
Yeah.
Then the first 45 minutes of the day, create opportunity and know my calendar. And then afternoons, appointments. I got a 1 o'clock, a 2 o'clock, a 3 o'clock, a 4 o'clock, maybe a 5 o'clock to sell. Sell those 5 appointments. You got a great life.
And then stack it for decades, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And don't stop.
Yeah.
And if you think about that, like it's not that hard. You notice I didn't say, I'll schedule some time in for procrastination, schedule some time in for fear about your competitors, maybe schedule some time to really drive your insecurities. And if you look at that, that's what you're doing when you're on social. Like it's a highlight reel. I've never come off social media and gone, geez, I want another 20 minutes of that. And that's the most important conversation, right?
So when and how often should agents be looking at social media then?
Oh, well, like I'm going to say it's a part of your marketing plan. So who does the marketing inside of your team? I don't.
Okay. And if you haven't got somebody doing that, then schedule it. So it's a marketing function. It's an activity that doesn't need to be done. Certainly doesn't need to be done during the morning when you focus on outbounding lead generation activities.
Like, will this or won't this help me to be the type of person I want to become? So ultimately, when you start to think about the quality of a routine, It's about the consistency of doing that. Like, you and I both went to the Australasian Auctioneering Championships, and in order to get there, we actually set up a routine to make that happen. We had the opportunity to work with the best in the business at the time in 2005. I think Justin Long had won it.
Longy, yeah.
And we went to Longy, and he trained us, to get there. And I made it through practically with little to no auction experience, and you made it through with a lot of auction experience. And how did we get there? We got training, we got coaching, we made the effort. We went to Melbourne, we got in front of like one of the best at the time, and ultimately we learnt the skill and we learnt the trade. And that routine was then every day. I don't know about you, but I had a good friend who had a restaurant, and whilst he was setting up the restaurant in the morning for the lunchtime and dinner time trade, whilst he was putting out all the cloths on the tables, I was doing mock auctions in his restaurant over and over and over again, learning how to actually do the bids until I got to a position that I was competent in that skill. And that, like, you don't go from like zero to hero overnight. And it's like, I went to go and see Circus Soleil here in Adelaide once, and where we happened to be recording today, and like I went, oh yeah, I could do that. Those backflips look pretty normal, and man, I went home and I tried to do the backflip. Man, it was a disaster, right? and it's like the amateur thinks they can do it until they try. And then they realize I'm lacking technique, I'm lacking training, I'm lacking skill, I'm lacking routine, I'm lacking flexibility. Yeah, well, the only reason you don't have flexibility is you don't have a routine around it. So that's a really important skill.
So why do you think agents have a fascination with trying to avoid routine? Like straight away, like if somebody's got a hole in their, say somebody's struggling with real estate business, in their real estate business, Josh, and I said, well, Phil, come and have a look at it. Tell me how, what do I need to do? Like straight away, I'm going to pinpoint without even knowing anything about their business. I guarantee there's going to be a lot of, a lack of outbound prospecting activity, generally speaking, inside somebody's business.
Yeah.
Why do agents avoid routine?
Well, I think if you think about it, Mang Yang Wing probably says it best. She says to know and not to do is to not know at all.
Yeah.
And so like, okay, great. Knowing is doing, and doing is mastery. So if you think about it, okay, great, you want to become the best in the world at that, you're going to need to get it. And
do it.
That's, I think, that, why we got along in the early days so quickly was because, when we were sending each other listing presentations to review on audio, before that became an easy thing to do, like, there was a lot of barriers to entry. We had to record it to a tape or to a CD, and we had to send it to each other and listen to it and play it back and do all of those things. But mate, we were just absolutely hungry. There was a special skill. There was something that was innately in our environments that we made the decision that we were unhappy with where we're at, and we made the decision that we wanted to get better. And I just think that's like, and we could have just stayed doing what we were doing. And this is the big difference, is that we didn't, is that we hooked on, we met at a conference, whatever that was. And then we said, okay, great. And I thought, what, he's more successful than me. I'm going to follow that guy. And then you were like, oh, who's that upstart probably? And literally, and then, we had to go. And I think that's the difference is that you will never know the power of the routine until you've done it for like a year. And then you learn. And like, here's the easiest thing to think. From an amateur's point of view, I'm going to run 1,000 Ks a year. Never ran before. I was not athletic. I didn't find any sort of performance until maybe I hit 30. And I was like, okay, great, I'm going to run 1,000 Ks. And the story is great. I go out, I run my little heart out. I get to the end of the year. I check in on the Nike running app, and I've been running all the time, and I've run 465 kilometers. So it's like, okay, great, I got to do circa, I don't know, another 535 kilometers in the course of the next 6 days before the end of the year. I'd left my run too late. And then short of a couple of ultra marathons, I learned I didn't have a system in play. I then switched it in the following year, 5K a day, Monday to Friday, 10K Saturday, 10K Sunday. Do that on repeat on average for 50 days a year. You'll get over 2,000. Now I run close to 2,500 kilometers a year, and I've done it for 10 years straight. Touch wood, no injuries, no issues with ankles, knees, and hips, because literally there's a stretching routine and a process of how you get there. I don't know about you, but that literally has taught me so much about the discipline on what it takes to be successful. Is it's the same thing over and over and over, but literally make sure that you love doing it, you learn to love it, and you become the best in the world at it, right? Phil, this leads us into our principle. Everything you want in life is just outside your comfort zone. Tom O'Toole, like the baker from Beechworth Bakery, he's kind of a bit crazy. I think you saw him at Arik, in the very early days. You start thinking about that. How much of what you've wanted in your life was in your comfort zone?
Basically none, right? Yeah. So, and that's a continual progression to this day of just striving for all of the things that I'm trying to achieve and wanting to be, not only as a real estate agent, but as a father and as a husband and as a friend and all of those sorts of things, continually striving to become the best version of myself. And so I think that today has been a really great conversation for me to go back and just reflect upon the existing routines that I've got in my life, but also just realizing, Josh, I think for people who may be kind of listening who haven't quite got the routines that are established that they are hoping, I think for all of us, we're all on that journey. Like, I'm thinking about the existing routines I've got in my life going, some of them just aren't quite where I want them to be, and it's a continual progression of that.
Feeling good and ready for more? Thanks for joining us
on Dream Big,
Move Fast.